Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they of course get better. And today, it is an example of how things can get marginally better even while we are waiting for the, well, let's face it, the leftists to be destroyed. Because today we are getting just a little bit of a teaser of Labour finally getting the message, and that actually immigration is a massive problem, and unless you get a handle on it, you have absolutely no chance of winning the next election. Personally, from what I can tell, I think they are already screwed for the next election. I don't think anyone would trust them at this point, even if they practically solve immigration. Because, as we'll go through, I don't think they have what it actually takes to get to the point of fixing immigration, but I'll take what I can get, and what I can get is pretty good. So according to the Times, all migrants will have to be fluent in English to stay in the UK, yet tighter rules will require people applying for UK work visa to show high standard of English, so it's not quite stay in the UK, it's to come over on a work visa. Which is fair enough. I've actually heard for well over a decade at this point of people effectively getting fed up that they will go into a shop or something and these people won't know much English. They'll communicate in either broken English or start using hand signals or what have you, and people will effectively get fed up because they do not want to feel like that they are not somewhere in Britain when they are actually in Britain. So the current standard equivalent to English as a foreign language GCSE is seen as too basic to allow integration, and I'm not being funny, but I don't even believe that a lot of people coming over with an English GCSE equivalent actually know English at all, really. You know, there's fraud going on out there is what I'm saying. It requires migrants to be able to understand the main issues regularly encountered in work, school or leisure, deal with situations likely to arise while travelling, and produce simple connected text on topics which are familiar or of personal interest. The standard is expected to be raised to almost the equivalent of a foreign language A-level, known as a B2, in the Home Office website, and according to the Home Office this requires people to express themselves fluently and spontaneously without much obvious searching for expressions, and speak English flexibly and effectively for social, academic and professional purposes. So they are definitely upping the standard. How well this will be applied, we don't know yet. However, this is definitely something that an awful lot of people have asked for. And the main complaint back here is, well, what about all the expats in Benidorm? To which the answer is, well, the Spanish are more than within their rights to, yes, demand that all these people speak fluent Spanish. If they are willing to give up their expat tourism income that quickly, then, well, more power to them, I guess. So the upcoming white paper is designed to tackle record levels of net migration, which stood last year at 728,000, and help to get more than 9 million economically inactive people into work. Again, this is basically all problems that Reform have been pointing out and working on policy for. The Prime Minister is expected to say that the points-based immigration system introduced by Boris Johnson after Britain left the EU in 2020 has failed and set out reforms to reduce net migration and promote growth. Government sources have said that the immigration white paper will include plans to take tight control to deliver a system that is controlled, selective and fair. Other reforms, it's really funny, they keep using the word reform, and this was why Reform UK was just great branding. Will strengthen the rules covering the checks carried out to ensure that all migrants can prove their knowledge of English. It is understood that successful asylum seekers will be required to meet this standard after 5 years to be given permanent settlement. And after 5 years, having indefinite leave to remain, that is also being looked at, but not in this article yet. Migrants will be told that if you want to come here, you must contribute and integrate, a government source said. Again, that is exactly what Reform have been saying for months. This is why I've been fully behind them. This is why every party is pivoting toward the Reform position, and this is why every party to the right of Reform is pivoting to the Reform position, because they have the popular position. Though this article does get incredibly cringe here, the white paper is also expected to require migrants to show they are aligned with broad British values, such as democracy, tolerance of different faiths, beliefs and cultures, and the Times understands, though it is not clear how this will be tested. I don't know how you can test that, you can just lie about that. In fact, that's largely supposed to be tested in the citizenship system we have now. I guess this is for the migration one, but I have no idea how you test for that. The Reform version is just way easier. Did you commit a crime? Well, we're going to assume you don't uphold British values, given that British law is supposed to implement British values, and of course they're going to make a load of changes to British law because we shouldn't have equality acts and things like that. So these types of questions are only asked as part of the Life in the UK test requirement for migrants applying to permanently settle in the UK after at least 5 years of residence, and having done 10 dozens, I guess, of those over on Tailed Features channel with his whole stream, that unfortunately he's taken them all down now, but whatever. We used to do a practice quiz of one of these every week, and effectively it was a history / what happens when you get arrested quiz. Pretty much every single one had a question about the Grand National, for example. It wasn't actually that good, and there were loads of Facebook pages we found of effectively people training others on how to ace the exam, because that's all it is, it's a memory test. Employers will be prevented from hiring foreign workers if they fail to train staff in Britain. Again, I think that was a reform pledge. For every person you have working with you, you need to make sure you're training up a Brit. I might have that confused. I know for a fact that reform said if you hire a foreign worker, you will have extra tax put on you for that worker. But yes, it goes into detail that if there is a labour shortage in a workforce, then the strategy has to be you can look overseas for foreign workers, but at the same time you have to boost skills of the people in the UK. And this is part of the reason why they are saying, oh, we're also going to get people off, benefits and just being neats, because they will have massive opportunities to be trained by these companies that are effectively surviving with foreign workers. A much better way to do this, by the way, would just be solve the high energy prices thing, because then you would have loads of jobs going about, because it wouldn't be too expensive to keep your businesses running, especially if you're in like manufacturing or something like that, where your energy prices will be astronomical. Anyway, yesterday there were further announcements, with staying in the UK as a privilege, not a right, Keir Starmer will tell migrants after Reform's election gains. The PM is set to unveil plans to cut net migration by targeting low-skilled workers, which is good. That is one of the main problems we have with legal migration. You have an awful lot of low-skilled workers that we probably don't need and end up working for Deliveroo and things like that, usually illegally as well. Plus they can bring a load of dependents if they're, say, care workers. It was massive, and Boris Johnson never wants to talk about it, and in fact obfuscates whenever it comes up. But anyway. So the Prime Minister will declare in a Downing Street press conference, we're not going through that whole thing, I'll pick out a couple of highlights, that indefinite leave to remain in Britain is a privilege that must be earned, not a right. At the moment the rule is if you've been in Britain for 5 years, you have indefinite leave to remain, and it, in all but name, makes you a citizen. You don't get citizenship. You can't vote unless you're from the Commonwealth. Commonwealth people get the right to vote straight away here, by the way. He's not going to change that. I imagine because Labour get an awful lot of votes from people like that. But it's absolutely ridiculous, it's crippling us, and the reason that there needs to be a bit of a rush on this is because, well, the Boris wave was in 2020. It is now 2025. They are coming up to being able to remain here indefinitely, which obviously needs to be revoked. Unveiling an immigration white paper along with Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, Starmer will focus on low-skilled workers in a move that threatens the social care and university sectors. Oh, thank God for that, they are two of the worst. And the thing with the university sector is that wouldn't be so bad. If these foreign students were effectively learning internationally, there's university professors, lecturers, whatever, who only work online, because an awful lot of, say, Chinese students won't move over here because of cost and what have you, and they will just learn British university standard courses while staying in China. It is completely possible to do that, and hey, you can record the lectures. Social care as well, obviously that might be an issue for pensioners, but if the price for that goes up, so be it. He will criticise the broken immigration system, pledged tougher enforcement and fall in net migration numbers to prioritise those who contribute to Britain's growth and society, which is barely any migrants. There's still a few of them, don't get me wrong, but when most of them who come over are dependents, that means they're dependent on the state as well as the people who brought them over. He has, however, resisted setting a new migration target. Reform and the Conservatives said this meant that he had pledged to curb arrivals and rang hollow. And yes, we will get into all that because I want to go through each party's reaction to all this and, well, how Labour are doing. So we'll move over to a clip from the speech that Keir Starmer gave today, and to be honest with you, it was pretty good.
Let me put it this way. Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, often they're not. But either way, they give shape to our values, guide us towards our rights, of course, but also our responsibilities.
As I said, so far, pretty good stuff. In isolation, this is all true. The unfortunate thing is that this is obviously the Blairite values thing, as we saw before in the first article, that British values mean tolerance and democracy, which is only very true for the left wing of Britain. And to be honest with you, most people in Britain do appreciate democracy to some extent, and a lot of people are tolerant, but to say that they are the defining and main British values that we have, and that they're the only ones that other people care about, it's got to get nowhere. Rule of law has to be at the top. Respect for the family and the institution that it creates. That is also a big one. And that's very specific, actually. That obviously just means monogamous relationships as, well, frankly, described in the Bible. But obviously that's been bastardised a bit thanks to things like, gay marriage and things like that, which, not completely ruined it. People seem to be getting married more now, to be fair. But this is where it all falls down. All the undercurrent of what's really being said here. The whole meta-argument about immigration. Because it's true, for years now we've had complete garbage immigration. The grooming gangs are still running, by the way, and Labour have people in the cabinet effectively saying bringing that up's a dog whistle, obviously for some sort of racial complaints, I guess you put it. So while this might be the official Labour line that they show to the public, unfortunately they still have people that let the mask slip, and realistically it's kind of just the bare minimum they're doing at this point. It's better than nothing, don't get me wrong, it's certainly realigning to the reform position, that's fine, but I wouldn't expect any large-scale and massive results until Labour are out, effectively. And Tories aren't to be trusted either, but we'll get into that.
The obligations we owe to each other. Now, in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that.
Yeah, so you got to make sure that the left wing are still on board with Labour. Oh, this sounds like it's going to get a bit racist. Unfortunately for Labour now, they've chosen a remarkably undiverse cabinet, so they have to overtly virtue signal on this point constantly, because they don't have the black lesbian to hide behind whenever they make nationalistic sentiments. Reform don't really care because they don't particularly care for that section of the vote, because, to be honest with you, those that actually care whether you say diversity is our strength or not is actually remarkably low. Most people unironically have the Martin Luther King view on this. Let's judge people by the content of their character, not the colour of their skin, etc, etc, etc. Going on about diversity, doing the complete opposite. People have finally landed on that truth, and I'm very happy to see that. Doesn't stop Labour from constantly having to virtue signal, though, which is hilarious because it's only going to harm them.
These rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together.
Oh, interesting. I've heard this sentiment somewhere before. But while to the immigrant entry to this country was admission to privileges and opportunities eagerly sought, the impact upon the existing population was very different, for reasons which they could not comprehend, and in pursuance of a decision by default, on which they were never consulted, they found themselves made strangers in their own country. And apparently we're at that point. Anyway, that was from the Rivers of Blood speech by Enoch Powell, or the Birmingham speech as he preferred to call it. And yeah, we are at the point where this is being said by every major party, all three of them. Or I guess two of them. Tories have been destroyed recently, but I don't think we're quite at the point where we can say they're a minor party, despite what Nigel Farage may say. But this is an incredible vibe shift. Unbelievable, in fact. I didn't really ever see this happening until at least Reform were in power, and it was quite clear that Labour would have to pivot right, but I didn't think that would happen for another few years, especially a few months ago. Maybe after the recent elections, yeah, it's pretty obvious that this had to happen. But if you told someone a year ago that Keir Starmer would be on stage paraphrasing Enoch Powell's Birmingham speech, I don't think anyone would have believed you. I certainly wouldn't have, and here we are. What a timeline. Thank you very much, Reform. This is pretty much entirely down to you.
So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people.
Well, hang on that point, there's a bit of an issue there with the Indian multinationals now having the right to send over cheaper Indian labour on a temporary basis, mind you, but that's a temporary basis where they can stay for 3 years, then they start paying national insurance, obviously, so then you just swap it out for another one of their workers to work in the same place for 3 years. So again, you may have the rhetoric, but you actually look a little bit deeper into things like the Indian trade deal and other areas of policy, and you'll realise that, yeah, they're doing kind of the bare minimum, the stuff that looks good in headlines. You have to speak English to be here, for example. And yet because immigration over the years has turned into such a gargled, tangled mess, it'll take a hell of a lot more than that to actually get somewhere decent, or very good, I should say, on immigration. Get credit where it's due, this is probably decent for what you could reasonably expect from Labour.
Or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise?
Ah, yes, you wouldn't dream of doing that, would you, Mr. Starmer?
Then you're not championing growth. You're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo. You're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart.
Yeah, I'd argue making business basically impossible to actually run in this country. I mean, I don't know a single business that's looking to actually expand this year. I guess Asylum Hotels is one that, you know, they recently made a billionaire of the main guy that was selling his hotel rooms to the government for asylum seekers. So I suppose the only way you get to grow in this country under a Labour government, and to be fair, under most Tory governments, is if you align with the government in terms of providing them services they will pay out of the nose for, while you give them lacklustre results. And if you're a lawyer, of course. Lawyers gain absolutely loads from the current regime, mainly because everything for some reason has to go through a court. You got wages, can go to court to see if they're set right. You got called Darth Vader at work, you can get £30,000 out of that in damages. Unironic story recently, by the way. This might all be a little off topic from immigration, but it's very annoying hearing a human rights lawyer who has massively benefited from the status quo say, I am definitely against the status quo. After, nearly a year in government? 9 months, I think. And the main things he has changed, just off the top of my head, is taking down a load of historic portraits in Parliament and replacing them with things like Yvette Cooper, giving an absolute shed load of cash over to the public sector workers who are now striking and demanding more, and letting in more illegal immigrants than ever while saying he's going to smash the gangs. Just to think that you can do all this and also complain that Tories were not going status quo hard enough over the past decade, and then try and pivot to be anti-establishment, it's never going to work. This is why reform is going to do absurdly well over the next few years.
So yes, I believe in this. I believe we need to reduce immigration significantly. That's why some of the policies in this white paper go back nearly 3 years. Why I told the Labour Party conference, taking back control is a Labour argument. And why, most importantly of all, inward migration is already falling with this government.
I mean, just a few points on that. Yeah, it's very easy to complain about the Tories letting in millions of people, but again, you can't forget that Labour either weren't talking about that or were saying, actually, immigrants are good and we need more. That's what they were saying for the past 5 years. You can't ignore that. And yes, having control of borders and reducing immigration, those are two very good ways to show that, yes, you are in control. So we need to know how you're going to get that control. And blaming the Tories is only going to get you so far. I mean, again, to be fair to them, it is pretty amazing that Starmer's finally saying stuff like this.
A one-nation experiment in open borders, conducted on a country that voted for control.
All while Labour basically didn't have any sort of immigration policy that was going to significantly reduce them. This is why, once again, they are having to look over to reform for their policy. Honestly, every side of the political spectrum is just focusing in onto reforms one. It's pretty crazy. But then when it comes to actually more important stuff, and you get on to the details of actually how do you stop the more wide-scale or large-scale immigration issues, well, you get bad answers.
Does going further mean disentangling ourselves from the ECHR and disapplying human rights laws in immigration cases?
No.
Amazing. No hesitation there either. Are you going to leave the ECHR? Nah. Which is exactly my point. They will do things that look good on headlines and superficially look like they're going to do something, and then you look into the details of anything else, that other large-scale policies, and it's not going to do anything particularly. And just to show you exactly what I mean by this, Carl Williams over at the Centre for Policy Studies, a think tank that looks into policy, believe it or not, has written a whole thread on the entire white paper. I suggest you give it a read. But just right from the start, this is showing the exact problem I have. So the thread, initial thoughts, section by section on the government's immigration white paper, Too long didn't read. It concedes most core arguments for having a much more selective system with far lower levels of net migration, but the policies do not match rhetoric. So that is rhetoric on housing's got worse, the economy's got worse, mass immigration has not helped the economy, or super turbocharged it even, as much as economic orthodoxy would have us believe, and so it needs to be reduced. But the thing is that it's pretty clear that Labour are aiming for a net migration of about 200,000 to 300,000 per year, as per the 2010s, which is when Brexit was becoming a massive issue, directly thanks to immigration issues. And while that is a 2/3 reduction on recent highs, it's still massive by historical standards. In fact, throughout the late 19th century as well, when we had the biggest rise in living standards pretty much ever in Britain, you had net emigration. That's obviously largely thanks to the empire in places like Australia and South Africa, Rhodesia and things like that. Now, if you look into the 20th century, and our best economic time was obviously under Thatcher, net emigration mostly there too. And certainly not net immigration that is 1% of the population a year. And so, yeah, anyone who links immigration with improving the economy, it's just nonsense. It's been nonsense forever. I've pointed it out all the time. And it's good to see that this is now the mainstream talking point, even by the left-wingers. By everyone apart from the Greens, as it turns out. So let's hope that we actually eventually get a party that is serious about this and will actually deliver on the whole immigration issue. Anyway, as mentioned before, everyone's just converging on the reform agenda, and that's why Conservatives have now thrown out that they want to deport all foreign criminals. Again, there's not really much to say on the Conservatives at this point other than, one, why did you let them all in? Two, why were you not doing this when you were actually in power? And the standard answer is quangos, 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 civil service, civil service, civil service. To which even when reform get into councils, they've already got legal teams set up. And basically an entire institution that is there to fight legal battles against both the parliamentary government and the civil service. That's already pretty impressive just for local government, to be quite honest with you, but honestly, that's to be saved for another whole video. But as I say, I really can't see myself going deeper into the Tory position other than you had 14 years to do all this. Why didn't you do anything? Kemi also did a little promotional video saying Labour has blocked every single measure we've put forward to cut immigration and stop abuse of the system. Are you kidding me? You were in cabinet for years. Now they're pushing one half-arsed proposal. I am somewhat surprised that leader of the opposition tweeted that, but okay. It's weak, it won't work, it's time they stop playing games and backed our deportation bill, which as you can see on screen includes deporting foreign criminals, making age checks mandatory, tougher visa rules, disapplying the Human Rights Act to immigration cases, and make asylum support repayable. Long story short, again, this is basically all reform light policy. Again, everyone's just converging on the reform position. If you're at that point, just vote reform. They're the ones who've been serious about it for years, so there you go. Anyway, another Tory issue is that they can't actually manage message discipline. For instance, they were saying the other day that they are demanding a migration cap, which they were promising, obviously, every election since David Cameron and never actually implemented. It was always within the tens of thousands, even under Suella Braverman, because I guess that seemed realistic and, you know, it looked like that they'd be doing something about it. Anyway, this was Chris Philps on the BBC just yesterday.
It'll be a further reduction of significantly more than 50,000. It will take the levels substantially further down below the most recent forecasts from the OBS and ONR, which are about 300 to 350,000 a year.
So substantially below
substantially lower than that. And the further reductions, the further cuts, will be more than 50,000. We need to...
So we're talking about numbers that are more than 50,000 and should be below 350,000 a year. That, to my mind, means that is their very, very, very upper limit. They want it substantially below that. Let's say 50,000 below that, at least. That's 300,000. How much more below that are we talking about? It doesn't particularly make it clear. You've got to realise the problem with this messaging is that you are up against an insurgent right-wing party that is currently absolutely sweeping the nation's elections, who have not only been firm on that the cap should be 0, 1 in, 1 out, as people always say, oh, that's still really bad, whatever. That's way better than what either other party is offering. That's what I care about. And in fact, in one of his most recent immigration announcements, Nigel Farage was even saying they'll have to even look at that net zero cap and say we'll probably have to go even further because there have been more people leaving the country than they actually thought there was, or at least than was projected. News actually came out shortly after that saying actually the exodus has not been as large as they were expecting, so God knows. All I do know is that if we're talking about caps and who's going to actually stop legal immigration the most, it's still reform. That's the whole point of this. So even though I've heard for ages, Labour and Tories, they're outflanking reform from the right, it's never true. It is literally never true. It's not true in this case either. We are seeing them effectively panicking about the immigration debate, and they are still firmly on the left-wing side of it. Firmly. Even the Tories are, despite the fact they should have learned from everything. Deport all foreign criminals. Yep, that's an easy open goal. Everyone wants that. What about the legal cap? I guess we'll put it a few 100,000. Great. That's what Labour are apparently going to have anyway from the Centre for Policy Studies research that they did into it before. So great. You're as good as Labour. Anyway, Phillips goes into why the economic arguments about immigration don't make sense. We know what they are. I don't really care beyond that. Just compare it to your average reform interview.
We need to leave the ECHR, which of course the Tories won't do, and frankly we should scrap the Human Rights Act and start again,
Is that
which
what you're
again
definitely going
the
to do?
Tories wouldn't do. So look, it's a step in the right direction, but all these things, as you quite rightly challenged Chris Philp on, why didn't they do this when they were in office? And that's why we're doing so well in polls. That's why no one trusts them anymore.
Message discipline. Keep attacking the other two parties. Mention how well we're doing. It's all of this stuff that is going to get people to want to go out and vote, which has been my point for months. This is what reform are all about, and it's why they're doing so well. And now, obviously, that they're in power in an awful lot of places, from the looks of it, from what I've seen, it looks like they're actually going to try and deliver results in those local areas as well. And what happens when you have all these plans that come together? You get a damn good political party from the looks of it. So let's hope that they can deliver results in councils, and I have a good feeling that they will. And if they do well in the local councils, why wouldn't they do it nationally as well? You have that on top of policies that are either largely popular or going to do well with the electorate, and there you go. It's a recipe for a one-party state. I'm not expecting anything close to that, by the way, but they've been exceptional. And then, of course, at big policy announcements, there are quotes like this. We demand a minister for deportations. It will be part of the Home Office, but it will be a separate department within it. We will need to recruit new people, as the evidence at the moment suggests that those who work in the Home Office would willfully obstruct policies if we won the next general election. And this was in a speech where they said they were going to deport every illegal in 5 years and every criminal in 5 years, and that is far better than what they were saying a few months ago. I imagine they have shifted on that point over to effectively speeding up what they want to do to within one parliament rather than having to hope you can win further elections, because they've probably found out it's probably actually possible to do after talking to people like Dominic Cummings and Liz Truss, who both got ruined by the civil service, and who, if you bring them on board, can be professionals who can deal with the civil service and know effectively how to work around the entrenched anti-right-wing bias, I guess you could call it, of the civil service. Because there's been constant news stories about who they've been meeting and what their plans might be, and I think Occam's razor's just right here. They're talking to people who have dealt with the civil service so that they can be prepared for the civil service and possibly even get them on board to work with them. Like Dominic Cummings, it would be amazing. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, reform is basically turning into an entire institution to try and fight the civil service and the national government, while they just control 10 councils. Here's Reform Chairman Zaya Yousaf.
A lot of these hotels, when you suddenly turn them into something else, which is essentially a hostel, that falls foul of a number of regulations, and that's what our teams of lawyers are exploring at the moment. And we can look at budgets as well. So the word we used was resist. Look, we're not in government yet. That's our plan. And that's why people watching this programme who believe in these values, who don't want to live around people whose first action upon coming to this country was to break our laws and then to live at the behest of taxpayer money.
Team as lawyers, they're looking into how they can fight the national government. They're looking at how they can stop the very thing that Reform were voted in to stop. They only have so much power. They're very realistic about it. This is what I have been saying for some time. It is a party of business people. They will be under-promising and over-delivering. That will be what they are aiming for. Why? Because it's incredible how in business, how useful that is. Yeah, we'll give you some expectations. Oh, you went better than it? Psychologically, that makes customers go nuts. They love it. They're happy to throw more money at you. This is even better. This is votes. This is free. This is just people's time that they're asking for. It's a much easier sell. And so, you know, it could all go wrong. There could be no results, sure. But for now, we don't know if there are or aren't any yet. So I am keeping my support with reform, of course.
There are a number of instruments at our disposal, which our teams are working. We've only just won the election, right? So what we're going to be doing in Reform Control Council, this is our commitment, we will use every instrument available to us.
Perfectly fine and good. And if it turns out that using these instruments will, and I know to some extent there are instruments that do help. I have anecdotes of some hotels in my old area were being used or planned to be used by the Home Office to house asylum seekers. And the council got into talks with the MP saying, can you stop this? They said no. There was a compromise of, oh, it's only going to be families and mainly women and children, so it's less bad than, obviously, the single men. This was because it was a Tory council in a Tory government. This was a few years ago, obviously, or post-Labour. That stuff's been ignored, and the hotel now houses young men. But given that Reform, as I say, is full of businessmen, they will do what they can to find every avenue to try and fight this, I have no doubt. And it sounds like they're already doing it. You know, they've only just won. Wait for the news articles to come out to where they go further. That's what I say. And obviously Reform are keeping on top of keeping all parts of immigration on topic. And they've thrown out this tweet. Labour do not care about our borders. Small boat crossings have surged under their watch. Our borders need reform, with the number 34,758. And of course, there were even more people coming over on the boats today, and there's been plenty of images, plenty of videos of that. So, of course, this is just one aspect of the issue we're having when it comes to immigration. So with that, yes, I am mostly on the side of this is obviously a step in the good direction. It's good to see absolutely every party in Britain, sorry, the major ones, I should say. Lib Dems and Greens still seem to be on the pro-migration side of things. Moving more toward the whole reform, let's get immigration sorted position, deport absolutely every illegal, deport absolutely every, sorry, not even illegal, it's criminal. You know, the Tories are only on deport the criminal side of things here. To be fair, that would include illegals as well, so let's not be harsh here. But yeah, just constant failure from the two major parties. That's what we've had every time there's been a bad decision on immigration or something like that. Labour have been at the sidelines saying, oh, that's because you need to make the even worse decision here. And people remember, and I think people are going to remember for quite a long time, and I think mildly aping Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, while at the same time having a party that thinks he was the most evil man on the planet, is not going to cut the mustard. But hey, we'll see where it leads to, but I am certainly enjoying already the pivoting toward the right from the two major parties, after it's clear Reform and not just a protest party. If they were just a protest party, this isn't the situation we'd be in. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a Tosh Talks. The topic will be the right-wing derangement syndrome of Farage, because I've been seeing far too much absolutely asinine takes about the man and Reform, and it's got to be me directly addressing it with a panel who, some of whom will be obviously keeping me in check and making arguments against me, and others clarifying my position, I'm sure. But it's something that absolutely needs to be talked about, because it's just getting ridiculous. Thursday it's more Subnautica, Saturday it's Laughing at the Guardian with some whamming, so do come along to those two as well. Videos out as and when I can make them. If you want to help out the channel, do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Great 3 ways to help out the channel. Or you could become a channel member, and also give me some money via Super Chats or Super Thanks. Those are also great and direct ways to help out the channel. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.